Hello, 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 and welcome to Talk Nerdy. It's Monday, May 1st, and I'm your host, Cara Santa Maria. And this week, I talked to one of the coolest chicks I think I've ever had on the show, Ariel Waldman. But before we jump into that, I want to thank those of you who made Talk Nerdy possible this week. Remember, Talk Nerdy is and will always be 100% free to download, and that's mostly because of the support from listeners like yourselves. There's a lot of ways to support the show. You can find them all at my website, carasantamaria.com, like visiting the Talk Nerdy store, rating and reviewing on iTunes, and also signing up to be a patron of the show via patreon.com/talknerdy. This week's biggest patrons include Phil T. Bear, Timothy Glover, Jonathan Wright, Christian Jeffrey, David Lacey, Jeffrey Perez, Stuart Ogg, The Honorable Husband, Jafe, Gabriel Felipe Jaramillo Gonzalez, Brian Holden, and Jeffrey Sewell. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. It really means a lot, and it makes it possible for me to continue to do the show. All right. I'm super excited about this week's guest. Her name is Ariel Waldman. She sits on the Council for NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts. She is the co-author of a National Academy of Sciences report on the future of human spaceflight. She's the author of the book, What's It Like in Space? Stories from Astronauts Who Have Been There. She's also the founder of spacehack.org and the global director of Science Hack Day. And we're going to dive into all of that. Dive and jive, I suppose. That's kind of a weird hybrid way to say that. We're going to dive into all of that right now on the show. So without any further ado, here she is, Ariel Waldman. Well, Ariel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited when I get a chance to talk to somebody I've never met in real life, which is kind of weird because we don't live that far away from each other, do we?
We tried, but we'll next time.
Next time. And also another, kind of cool, kick-ass reporter in the science world who is, taking names. And you have like this amazing, I don't want to call it your resume, but your career has so many facets. I think we're probably going to spend the entire hour just digging through all the cool stuff you do.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot, right? And so I first saw your byline, and this is such a funny thing that happens sometimes because I read a lot of science and I like to keep up to speed. And so I'll see writing by somebody and I'll be like, wow, I really liked that piece. And then I'll look at the person's name and start reading more about them. And so, of course, before we even recorded, I had to ask you, do you pronounce your name Ariel or Ariel? Because I've never heard it, said out loud. So I started by looking at your byline, and then the more I dug, the more I realized that you have like literally the coolest job in the world.
I don't know if that's true. I've heard some cooler ones, but I try.
Actually, you probably do coverage of some very cool jobs because, of course, you wrote a book. Let's start with that. You wrote a book called What's It Like in Space? Stories from Astronauts Who've Been There. Maybe that's a slightly cooler job.
Yeah, no, it was so much fun to put together. It was, I'm so happy. When a book finally comes out, you're just like, thankful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure. I mean, I've never had the pleasure, but it seems like so much work. I've been picking the brains of many authors that I've had on the show lately about their process and about some of the struggles, because it's something I ultimately want to do, but God, it's a labor of love, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I can tell you, like, my process probably doesn't look like the majority of authors' process because I'm just a bit eccentric that way. But yeah, it's it's a lot of work. But I think, at least in my case, this is not true for all authors for certain. But for me, if I'm going to do a book, I want it to be something that is just fun. I don't want to feel like it's my life's work and that if I mess any tiny little thing up, I'm going to be, forever regretful. So for me, it was the same as, making, websites or events or, anything really. It's just really about having fun with it. And I think that's sort of how I kept sane while I was writing it.
It's also absolutely reflected in the book itself. It is really fun. It's colorful. It's graphic. It's very modern. Like, it has a very cool look to it, which I think keeps you super engaged. And it has these wonderful little vignettes about all sorts of weird, gross things, which we love. Anytime we talk about space, I love all of the kind of bizarre little, I don't want to call them factoids. The other day I covered factoid on my other podcast, and I'm weird about using it because although now it means a little fact, it used to mean something that wasn't even necessarily true. So now I'm like really careful
like
about using the word
alternative facts or something.
Exactly,
Oh my gosh.
exactly. But, come on, a urine icicle? It's amazing.
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing story when I heard it.
And so, yeah, what made you interested in, I mean, I guess maybe it's better for me to ask that question after I have talked about would you call your day job? This is so confusing. You do so many things. Are you a freelancer, or would you say that your day job is sitting on the council for NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts?
I definitely say I'm independent. I kind of puzzle piece different projects together throughout the year. So NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts is one of those projects that I work on throughout the year, amongst many.
Cool. And so did the book come out of your work with NASA? Is the book a byproduct the same way your work with NASA is, just because you love space? What really first got you so interested in all things, I guess, outer there?
Well, with the book specifically, focusing on astronauts and their stories, a lot of it came from a few years ago, I was appointed to the National Academy of Sciences committee that was looking into the future of human spaceflight, which, by the way, I like getting a job at NASA. I didn't expect ever to be on the National Academy's committee. In fact, it was something that when they first emailed me and asked me to be on this committee that, advises Congress and the White House and NASA on the future of human spaceflight, I had never heard of the National Academy of Sciences.
Oh, wow.
And to the science community, that's so shocking. But outside of the science community, a lot of people have my same reaction of just like, what's that? So I almost didn't answer their email because I was like, who is this?
That's amazing.
So it's kind of like embarrassing now that I know like just how important they are. But that's true. And so, through this committee, it was looking into how to build a U.S. human spaceflight program over the next several decades that would be sustainable. And through that, I got to meet more and more astronauts. And while the committee's task was a very serious one, and we came out with a pretty detailed report about the future of human spaceflight, I got a lot of
279 pages it is. I'm looking at it right now.
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. Thankfully, there's a summary chapter up front. You can read the summary, and that's good enough. It's got a lot of really cool stuff in it, but yeah, I don't expect anyone to read all 300 pages.
And it's beautiful too, but you can download it for the PDF for free if you go to the National Academy's press. So I have to promote for you because you probably won't do it, but it's called Pathways to Exploration, Rationales and Approaches for a U.S. program of human space exploration. And that came out just in 2014, not that long ago.
Yes, exactly. So it's interesting, report. It's got a summary chapter, but it also has chapters about publicly available data in terms of support for for space exploration over the decades. It's got a technical chapter that talks about a lot of the challenges of different propulsion systems and radiation issues, and it's got a chapter on the rationales for why we should even be sending humans into space in the first place. So it's got like a lot of really interesting stuff in it, just to sort of page through. But so through this committee, I was meeting astronauts more often, and I just had a lot of downtime outside of the committee just to kind of talk to them about funny, weird stories that they had while they were in space. And so it was kind of nice for me because it wasn't getting to see an astronaut on stage with a very prepared presentation, but getting to hear, they're just silly stories that they would tell their friends over a drink or something. And so I'd keep coming home to my husband and telling him all these stories about, astronauts and their time in space, or urine icicles and how they had to snap them off of the space shuttle, and just hilarious things that like made for such good sort of party storytelling, I guess, in a sense. And so I decided that they made perfect sense to just collect. And I began collecting them. And then I started, for the book, I then interviewed about a dozen astronauts, asking them sort of to share their most embarrassing stories of their times in space. And then I also researched a lot of the historical interviews with astronauts about their experiences and kind of funny stories.
I love it. And so to back up a little, I guess, how did you first get involved working with the National Academies? Obviously, you said that they reached out to you to ask you to be involved in this committee. Was that because of the journalism that you had done?
No, so I wouldn't call myself a journalist. I write occasionally. I probably actually write very rarely compared to most people. I think what likely happened was I keynoted the 100-year Starship Symposium that DARPA had ran in 2011, I guess. And that was a big conference about how do we build an organization that could potentially support a starship that would be created 100 years from now. So they weren't trying to build a starship, but they were trying to create the environment that supported a starship. And this was a joint effort between NASA and DARPA. And I spoke at that conference a lot about how anyone can get involved in space exploration and how it can be more accessible to people with or without formal science backgrounds. And I think that's where they first saw me. And the thing that was really interesting about this National Academies committee that was brought together was it, in terms of topic area, it was definitely a very diverse committee. They didn't want to have the same movers and shakers that you usually see sort of in human spaceflight. They wanted to have an economist. They wanted to have a planetary scientist. They wanted to have a former Secretary of Defense. They wanted former astronauts. They wanted, space historians. And so in that way, I guess they wanted someone to sort of also represent what I hope to be the future of space exploration, which is making it more accessible beyond the usual, and that goes beyond even like the commercial space sector, just making space exploration something that everyone can participate in a meaningful way.
Kind of along that citizen science vein that we often talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
So your background, though, is at least partially in the sciences, is it not?
It's not actually. That's the thing that is really my driving force. So I went to art school, and I got my degree in graphic design.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so I came, from that world. I was absolutely obsessed with design. I didn't really self-identify as a space or a science geek. It's not that I disliked it. It was just something that wasn't really on my radar. And I was really tunnel focused on design. And my goal when I was, a young teenager was to become an executive creative director. I thought that represented such, unbridled creativity. Of course, I, didn't know everything at the time, but that it wasn't exactly all the bells and whistles that I had hoped for. But that's what I really strive to do. And I sort of started getting frustrated along my career path into design that I was, just designing, posters and brochures and websites, and it was all fine, but I felt like, well, is this really all there is? I'm just confined to this set of mediums to, express, creative, communication through. And so I, at one point, a number of things were adding up in my life, and I decided to move to San Francisco without a job and figure out what I was going to do. And I was watching a documentary on the Discovery Channel called When We Left Earth, about NASA trying to send humans into space. And the thing that was so cool to me about this documentary was that when they were interviewing the mission control guys, they were talking about how in the early days they didn't know anything about spacecrafts or rockets or orbits, and they were having to figure it out as they went along. And so I'm here in San Francisco, kind of figuring out what to do with myself and going like, well, I don't know anything about spacecrafts or rockets or orbits, and working at NASA sounds amazing. And I told that to a friend, and that friend was like, "Oh, I just met someone at NASA, and I have their email address if you want it." And I was like, "Hell yeah!" So I just emailed this person I had never met, telling them that I was a huge fan of NASA. I was like a fan of like all of like a few days or something, and that if they like ever needed, someone to volunteer or whatever, that I was here. And the day that I emailed them, they had just created this job description that read like my resume at the time, someone who had experience in design and marketing and was connected to the startup scene in San Francisco. And they explicitly wanted someone who had no experience with NASA whatsoever, because I ended up getting this job at NASA from that email, which was totally life-changing. But this program was trying to connect communities inside and outside of NASA to collaborate. So they wanted someone who had no experience with NASA to sort of help bridge that gap, and help bring communities together to create better solutions in science. And so it was completely unexpected, but that's what really changed my life and really made me want to be on the path that I am now, which is to make space exploration more accessible, so that I can give more people similar experiences to the one that I had.
What an incredible story. Isn't it funny when people ask, like, how did you get to where you are today? Or like, what's the right path to do what you do for a living? And it's like, sometimes stuff just happens.
Yeah. And, that dives a little bit into, privilege for sure. But, in my case, I think, I talk a lot about like, yeah, I sent this email to NASA and I got this job. And well, yeah, that's pure luck. I don't often talk about or get asked about all of the emails that I've sent to people that have gone completely unanswered.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure I've emailed Pixar and, Google X and who knows what, asking, can I get a gig there? And just like never received a response. And so, while it's not sound, career advice to just like depend on emailing random people, I do really advocate for just send people an email, and if they don't answer, they don't answer. But I've done this countless times throughout my career. When I was a designer, I would email the creative directors at like every agency I knew and just said, can you look at my portfolio? And just like give me feedback, even if you're not hiring, and just as a way of like meeting people. And it doesn't always work. A lot of times it doesn't, but occasionally you might hear back from someone. And even if it doesn't lead to a job, it might lead to like a really good, connection and get you into some of the communities that you want to get into. And the reality with NASA is, a lot of their email addresses are openly available. And while I can't speak on behalf of anyone at NASA, there are plenty of people, researchers there who, if you're really into astrobiology and you want to, sort of like drop by and see their stuff, like some people might be okay with that. A lot of people are busy, but occasionally you find someone who's like, yeah, let me show you everything about, slime molds or whatever it is,
Yeah. And you're a prime example of the fact that whatever you've been doing for your life, wherever the road has taken you, you look back, you've been collecting skills, collecting education, really focusing on your craft, whatever it may be. If you're creative, you may be able to apply that to things you haven't thought about before. There's not a perfect sort of assembly line checklist of how to get where you want to be. You can really forge your own way, and you can do it in unexpected and creative ways if you go for it. But a lot of times I think people are just really scared to go for it because they think, oh, but that's not the right way to get that job, or that's not the traditional way.
Yeah.
It's often the non-traditional individuals who I think have the most interesting careers.
Well, absolutely. I think it's something where, I can speak from the design perspective. A lot of people would look at my career and say, oh, she's, no longer a designer. She's now doing all of this other stuff. But to me, coming from the design world, like so much of design and design training is just understanding how to effectively communicate and understanding how when you tweak little things that it really changes the message and what you're trying to convey. And also it changes how accessible something is, how people can interact with it. Like the very, simplistic thing is, door handles. You change tiny things about door handles, it changes whether or not someone feels like they can open the door or not. And so design is really structured around, like the basics of it are structured around that. And so to me, coming from the design world, really, I feel like just being able to apply that thinking and that sort of way of really analyzing everything will make you effective no matter what area you go into. And so that was sort of my original frustration, was being told, oh, you can only design for print, you can only design for websites. It's like, well, why can't you take that sort of way of thinking and analyzing and affecting the world and apply it towards anything? So whether it's science or even some other discipline. And so I absolutely agree about coming in from a different area and having a lot of very unique and effective ways of doing things. And I think this is something that I get personally frustrated with still to this day, is that I think the science industry and the space industry haven't fully recognized just how much they can benefit by having people come in who are not necessarily self-identified space geeks and science geeks, but people who are, really great at other areas and other disciplines. And I think by not sort of creating salaried positions in their companies for an economist to come in, for a designer to come in, and sort of to let them make the connections that they make, I think we're losing out on a lot of clever creations in science, which in my opinion, is reckless.
Absolutely. And just new perspectives, just fresh ideas, because you haven't been bouncing around in the same box for so long. So it is pretty forward thinking, I think, of NASA to have offered the Colab program and for you to have had that amazing opportunity to be involved in it. So that really was kind of your entree into this world that has really taken over. This has become your main focus.
Yes. Yeah. No, it completely changed everything for me. I think once I had worked at this program, I couldn't really turn around and say, oh, well, I just did, space exploration one time for a gig and, now I'll be on my way, never to do it again. I was just like, this is amazing. I mean, how many people would kill for a job at NASA if you just said, you don't have to change anything about you as you are, you can work at NASA. Do you want it? Yes or no? Most people would say, hell yes.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And so many amazing things have come out of that. You have had the opportunity to write a white paper for the White House. You actually were honored by the White House. And that honor came from the work that you did, or I'm assuming it did, correct me if I'm wrong, with either Space Hack or with Science Hack Day, correct?
Yeah. I think it was probably a combination of the two.
Okay. And so those are probably, I would assume, big points of pride for you. So why don't you tell us about how they work?
Yeah, so with Space Hack, spacehack.org is a directory of ways for anyone to participate in space exploration with or without a formal science background. And I created it actually after being at this NASA Colab program, because I had heard about all of these ways when I joined NASA that people could contribute to space exploration. So things like discovering galaxies or building the next generation of Mars rovers. But all of these projects, I had never heard of them. They were buried deep in government websites. They were difficult to understand. And so, I thought, well, the most minimal thing I can do is curate these projects, sort of translate them into a way that's better to understand, and sort of get them out to communities that have never heard of these. And this is one of the things that NASA still really struggles with is, a lot of times they're speaking, in a silo and they're speaking to people who are already converted. They're already big space geeks. And that's great. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that, but they do really struggle to get out to people who don't self-identify as, space enthusiasts, but who would be interested in these projects. And so Space Hack really came out of that. with Science Hack Day is a weekend event in which scientists, designers, developers, and all different types of people get together in the same physical space to see what they can rapidly prototype with science in 24 consecutive hours. And so Science Hack Day came out after Space Hack. So spacehack.org I built in 2008. Science Hack Day started in 2010 because I had curated a panel at South by Southwest talking about sort of the frustrations of open science, specifically talking about how there was a big movement to make open science data available, but it was just kind of sitting, gathering digital dust, so to speak. And no one was doing anything interesting with all of this stuff that was being made available. And so a big argument I was making was how, this open science stuff wasn't actually accessible until someone built an interface to it or did something interesting with it or played around with it. And so sitting in the audience at South by was my friend Jeremy Keith, and he is like, well, we should do a Science Hack Day for this. And so he created the first one in London that year in 2010, and then I created the next one in San Francisco. And it was really just, around the mission of getting excited and making things with science. And we explicitly don't give challenges to people. We leave it open-ended so people can make silly things, they can make serious things. We don't really say, it's really just around playing with science stuff. And so we have, biologists and oceanographers and geographers and, web developers, artists, lawyers, writers. We are also pretty adamant about saying that, you don't need to have any hacker skill set and you don't need to have any experience with science. It's really just around really that core message of getting excited and making things with science.
This is amazing. And so you've been able to pull in some grant funding to help you do this, because I mean, even the way that you talk about it, it's not a small thing. This is like, I'm looking at how many of these hack days you guys have done, starting with London and San Francisco, like you said, in 2010. And since then, oh my God, Mexico, South Africa, Kenya, Ireland, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, Cyprus. This is crazy.
Yeah. So now we're in over 25 countries around the world. And I've had the great pleasure of getting to visit a lot of those countries for their Science Hack Day. So Madagascar, Russia, Mexico, Colombia, China. It's just been absolutely amazing.
Russia, Ghana, you've been everywhere. And so this seems like something that's not easy to put. It seems like it's something that takes a lot of work and a lot of volunteers, a lot of sponsorships, a lot of help to be able to make this a free event for the community to be able to come participate and really affect change. Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't say, I don't want to make it out to be difficult. It requires passion for sure. But, so with the global efforts, I've received a couple of small grants from the Sloan Foundation and the Moore Foundation, but they have only paid for maybe a couple months of my time at a time. And so I work on Science Hack Day year round, trying to get people to organize Science Hack Days in their cities. And so the majority of the work that I've done, the vast majority, is completely unfunded. And it's something that I'm just really passionate about. And equally, all of the events around the world, the local events, including the San Francisco event, they're all volunteer efforts. And so none of us ever accept pay for actually organizing the event itself. And it's, free for everyone to attend, which is also really important because I think a lot of event organizers really underestimate just how broke people can be sometimes. I've certainly gone through times where if I had to pay more than $5 for something, I couldn't do it. So if there was a $10 event, which is seen as cheap, I was like, I can't go. I literally can't afford that right now. And so I think that's a really important part of it. But getting people to sponsor the events has been really I don't know, heartwarming, I guess, is something. So the majority of the cost for each event goes to just providing food for everyone for free. So at Science Hack Day San Francisco, we provide 2 breakfasts, 2 lunch, 1 dinner, all for free, just so people don't have to worry about going out and getting food and being interrupted while they're working on cool science stuff.
That's very cool. But that's also not, you say it's free for people to attend. That doesn't mean it's free to do. Like, food is very expensive.
Right. Yeah. So with each event, pretty much like 90% of the cost of the event is just providing the food. So in each city is responsible for getting their own sponsors. For some cities that might only be, like $5,000. And for others, it might be $10,000. So it's kind of in that range. But because Science Hack Day is explicitly about multidisciplinary collaboration and getting people from tech and design and science together, it means that, organizations that really want to reach across industries have been really great sponsors. So organizations that are like, oh, well, we're a tech organization, but we're trying to reach more scientists or vice versa. And so those are a lot of the companies that will sponsor and will throw in, a little bit of cash so that we can get, the 5 to 10 grand typically that is needed to provide food for everyone for the weekend. And other than that, there's not really a lot of expenses because, it's a hack day. So it's really about people bringing whatever they have and sharing it with people and sort of working on things. And it's about prototyping things to any fidelity level. So you'll see hacks that are created out of cardboard or software or hardware or wetware. And we don't really care so long as people just prototype it as far as they can in whatever medium they want. We've even had teams that had, a piece of software break down that was part of their demo. And so instead their demo was like, they mimed how the software would work, with their bodies. So it's really just anything, so long as it's about, prototyping concepts.
It's so very cool. Guys, if you go to sciencehackday.org, you can look at all the past events. You can see that there are upcoming events this year: October in San Francisco, June in Brisbane in Australia. And also you can look at how to do this in your city, how to work to get sponsors and put on a Science Hack Day of your own in your city. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people listening are having a light bulb flickering above their heads.
Oh yeah,
right
they
now,
should totally do it. And the thing I would urge for anyone who's considering doing a Science Hack Day in their city, 1, you should totally do it. But 2, don't worry if you have no experience finding sponsors or anything. Even with the San Francisco event, this year will be our 8th event, and all of my co-organizers just groan every time they think about having to ask companies for sponsorship money. And it's again, as with everything that I try and do, it really is about making it accessible. And so you don't need to be an expert to get sponsorship money. A lot of times organizations are happy to support, community events, and it's just a matter of asking around. And we've found really great support from so many different places. And so I didn't want to scare anyone off with, the fact that you need to get some sponsorship funds to pay for the food. It's actually not that difficult a thing to do. It's kind of just emailing people and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you like to support?
And maybe restaurants in your area or individuals who would want to provide that food as well. There are other ways to get sponsorship. So there's so many ways that you can help out. And also, what a cool way to make new friends. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So cool to meet people who are like-minded, but maybe whose paths you would never cross because they come from a totally different industry, a totally different field, but they're goal-oriented like you are, and they love, they're makers, they're hackers, they love the same kinds of things. Well, so I'm super pumped.
Yeah, that's completely it. I with each city is different, and each city has its own sort of local motivation for why they personally want to do it. With San Francisco, was part of the motivation was, here we're in the Bay Area, you have the tech, industry, you have the science industry, both here, both representing very strongly. And you think there would be all this like lovely creative collisions happening between the two, if not even professionally, at least just socially and informally. And the reality is it's not really there that much. And I was so frustrated. And it came to a head for me when I had some friends from NASA who were visiting Google headquarters, and they were walking around Google headquarters and like tweeting out, "Oh my God, we're at Google. This is so cool." And then you had people at Google talking about, "Oh my God, there's people from NASA here. So cool." And so it's completely ridiculous in the Bay Area. You have these two industries that are just enamored by each other, and yet they don't interact at all. And so you get these situations where they're like, "Oh my God, I never thought I'd be at NASA. Oh my God, I never thought I'd be at Google." I was like, this is ridiculous. You're literally across the highway from each other, and so part of my motivation for creating Science Hack Day in San Francisco, at least, was that you have everything here. You have all the ingredients, but yeah, people are not getting in the same physical space with each other to collaborate, so I was just like, this is ridiculous. This needs to change. I'm doing Science Hack Day, and that's the end of it.
Well, yeah, and now I'm having that itch because I'm looking, and there's never been one in LA, which is crazy because we have JPL and Caltech and UCLA and USC and NOAA and like all of it, or at least in San Diego or, Southern California, so many brilliant people, so many creative, artistic, we graduate more engineers in the LA area than like most major cities. It's just crazy. This is crazy.
Yeah.
I feel like I got to get motivated now and do something about this. Yes, I'm so excited. Yay. I'm so glad that I've been fully introduced to this. I've had a good education on it. Hopefully everybody who's listening, who's not driving, it has their browser open and is like digging into how exciting this is. So Science Hack Day, sciencehack.org, or is it sciencehackday.org? Yes, sciencehackday.org. Guys, check that out. All right, let's get back to the show. We also talked about Space Hack for a quick minute, and this is a beautiful site. First of all, did you design this? You designed this,
yes.
Didn't you? It's gorgeous. It's a beautiful site where you can go, you can get lost, click through, and look at all these different ways where you can participate personally in these cool citizen science initiatives. I love this. So, and they cover everything: stars, the Earth, sun, galaxies, Mars, planets, comets, space-time, even some biology stuff here, black holes. And you can click through and learn about all of these different organizations. Not always here in America. Some of them are NASA, but some of them, it looks like, are other space organizations outside of the country, and some are any of these private organizations? I'm clicking through. I'm seeing a lot of
definitely, you definitely have a lot of nonprofits around.
Cool. And just a beautiful way to learn about them first, decide if it's something you're interested in, and then click through to the organizations that are doing these projects and enroll, sign up, get involved. I love this. Citizen science is like my favorite.
Yeah.
Isn't it cool?
Well, it's just, again, for me, it's all about infusing more serendipity into science. So getting people with completely different ways of looking at the world to lend their, perspectives and skills to something completely different.
Guys, you can donate your computer's idle time to help search for extraterrestrials if you go to SETI at home. Like, come on, this is crazy. I love it. So I'm assuming you said that you first launched this quite a while ago. What did you say, 2008?
Yes, yeah.
So obviously, this is not a 2008 website. I will say that.
Yeah, it's gone through a couple of redesigns. Yes. So I actually built the very first one on WordPress, like in 2 weeks. Like I spent pretty much, I was fresh out of NASA, and I was like, I'm going to build this freaking website. And I just spent 2 weeks, like nailed it out, like did all the writing and the design and the, curating and researching and everything, and knocked it out and put it up on WordPress. And, this is, I guess, true with like pretty much anything that I create. Is just, it's not that I've got like some super technical skills. It's just I'm using whatever is like immediately available for me just to get things out there. And because I just get so frustrated when something doesn't exist in the world. And so I think being okay with, prototyping something again, like in whatever way you can is just so important. So yeah, so spacehack.org now is a little bit more fancy than it used to be. It doesn't run on WordPress anymore, but yeah, it's been through a few redesigns over the years.
But that's how you do it, right? You rapid prototype first, and then you iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate until you find something that really, really works. And that's true for a new piece of technology, and that's true for a website. It's cool because it shows the process of what most people actually. I feel like that kind of reasoning applies across fields, like. If you do anything, that's how you do it. You prototype it first, and then you iterate until you get to a place where it's functional. And hopefully then you don't get complacent. You keep iterating even after it's working to make it better and better all the time.
Yeah.
I love this. This is so cool. And, I talk about citizen science all the time on the show. What a great place to find space-oriented citizen science projects all together. Guys, you should bookmark this. You should share it with all your friends.
Yeah, and I do a lot of work with SpaceHack to make sure that the projects are things where you're actually contributing to the furtherment of space exploration. And so, some citizen science projects, I think because citizen science has become such a broad term, a lot of times it also includes things that are just kind of like self-tutorials or self-education. But specifically with SpaceHack, the projects that I try and feature are ones where you could actually maybe discover a new black hole. You could actually contribute to a technology that goes to Mars. So there are projects where, at minimum, you're collectively participating in something that's actually leading to discoveries or solutions. And at maximum, you're actually becoming the discoverer.
So cool. Love it, love it, love it. And of course, because of the work that you did, as I mentioned before, both with spacehack.org and probably very notably with Science Hack Day, you were honored by the White House. This is so cool. You were honored as a champion of change. And what was that like?
It was I don't know if I have words for it. It was awesome. I don't know what else to say. So they, Obama had this Champions of Change program that tried to identify individuals and communities all across the country for different topic areas where they were making real change. So they've now had, I want to say, I don't know, I can't remember, something like 4,000, or maybe that's an underestimate. But they've had, in the thousands of champions of change because they have had so many different categories, veterans affairs and just everything. And so they had one for citizen science. And yeah, I got invited to the White House, which was crazy.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So it was, I don't know. It's just, there's different things that can help people a lot, like grants and funding, but also just getting acknowledged by the White House for your work. I think it's something that, we all need, that encouragement. I mean, that's why, you and I are on, Patreon and the like, is because, just having patrons and people who are supporting you, whether it be financially or just kind of becoming a supportive fan over time, I think helps, especially when you're independent and, it's hard sometimes to see if you're going in the right direction or if what you're doing is having an impact. You don't always see it. And so I was really happy that Obama put together that Champions of Change program, not just for my own experience for it, but I saw how it helped so many thousands of people who weren't always necessarily able to see if they were having an impact or not. So just to get that validation, I think, was incredibly important.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you said, it's about recognition, it's about validation. Both, like you said, sometimes it's necessary financially, which is why we do go the Patreon route and why we have to do what you talked about before, which can sometimes be frustrating, but do the fundraising. But also, it's psychologically, it's amazing when the tireless work that you do, and especially the work that you often do for no money,
Yes, yeah,
is
lots
recognized.
of that.
Yeah. And it's so great when we hear feedback on, even on like Twitter or Facebook, when people just like drop a nice note, like that can turn your day around, especially when you're slamming your head against the wall, frustrated by some project that's not quite going your way. And that's such a human thing, right? I think we all feel that way. A nice word around the office, a nice word of encouragement can go such a long way, and we often forget that. That we should be doing that for our peers as well, because they feel the exact same way that we do.
Yeah.
But how cool, how wonderful. Did they give you like a certificate or a piece of paper or anything?
Yeah, so I'm literally like looking at like Obama smiling at me right now from across the room, because
Cool.
They gave me Obama a letter from Obama and a signed picture and all that good stuff, and so like I framed it and I've got it in my office right now as like, because I'm a complete nerd.
I love it. I love it so much. So then, of course, you, because of a lot of the work that you have done, obviously you're invited often to give talks. You've been able to travel. You've appeared on some television shows. The funny thing is, I was looking at your TV appearances, Sci-Fi and the Science Channel. I clicked on the Science Channel show, How to Build Everything. We were both on that show.
Oh, you were on it too? Oh my God. Were we on the same episode?
I'm not sure. I can't remember which, because, for people who don't know, sometimes when you see these talking head TV shows, where it's just a lot of experts in a row, you shoot all of that content in one sitting, and then they sort of parse it out across different episodes. And so I don't even really remember which episodes I was on. I know I talked about a quadcopter, and I talked about an fMRI, and I don't know if I did much in space, so we might have balanced each other.
Yeah. So I did like spacesuit and rover and some other, like an actual rocket. So,
that's funny, because it was the original title was How to Build a Rocket,
yes,
but then they changed it to How to Build Everything, because, of course, an fMRI is not a rocket, so it makes a little more sense. But yeah, that's so serendipitous. I started laughing when I was clicking through and I saw that. That's great. And then you've also done some TV on Sci-Fi. Look, Let's Imagine Greater. It was a campaign, actually, and they've profiled you for it.
Yeah, so that was a campaign where they were trying to get a lot of their audience to actually, do the citizen science and go to spacehack.org and get more involved. So it was an ongoing campaign sort of in between all of the shows, saying like, hey, you like space and science fiction, like get involved, like do these things. And so that was really around, the tagline of Let's Imagine Greater, of, actually discover the galaxies that that show up in these sci-fi shows and everything. So that was really, really great to do.
How fun. And of course, this brings us back kind of full circle to what I opened the conversation with, which is sitting on the Council for NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts. So this is different than the Colab that you worked in previously. What do you do here? Does it have an acronym? Because that's hard to say. NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts.
Yeah, so it's also known as NIAC.
Okay.
So NIAC is pretty much the only program at NASA that funds the more sci-fi, futuristic, out there concepts that could potentially transform future space missions, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line. So they actually fund things that are very futuristic, but you could still do credible research in today. So you've got people researching, if we could do human hibernation on the way to Mars, people looking into, could we use comets as a type of kinetic propulsion system to travel the solar system faster? Could we send a submarine to the lakes of Titan and have it explore, the lakes of methane and ethane? So really, concepts that on the surface are definitely out there, but there's some R&D that you could be doing today, either in prototyping or just doing the math and researching, does it break down? So a number of the projects that go through NIAC, they do the research and they might find out that it's not as feasible as they initially thought. But then we've actually got the research to back it up, whereas before we didn't have any research to really say one way or another. And so with with NIAC, they've got a core staff at NASA. That's a really, really small team. But they also have an external council, which consists of people who represent different areas. So they've got quantum physicists. They've got quantum physicist is John Kramer and Frank Drake, who created the Drake equation.
Like, what an honor to be sitting on the same council with Dr. Drake.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah, he's such an awesome person. He's actually just a really funny person is actually how I would describe him. He likes funny jokes. But
and of course his daughter, Nadia Drake, is a really amazing science writer.
I'm jealous of her life. Have you interviewed her yet? Because
I'm hoping to have her on the show. We've been in touch to talk about having her on the show soon.
Yeah, because all the time I'm just like, oh, I'm so jealous of everything you're doing. They've also got like a sci-fi author, David Brin, and before they had an astrobiologist, Penny Boston, on the council. And so it's about 8 people or so that represent these different interesting areas of science. And the external council doesn't decide who gets funded by NIAC, but they sort of help steer the program in general and advise it. And so with me specifically, a lot of the work that I focus on with NIAC is getting researchers who don't work in space exploration to apply their research towards space mission context. So,
cool.
So trying to get neuroscientists to see if their research might be applicable for, human trips to Mars, or, in the case of, Titan submarine, you need oceanographers, you need people who might not do any work with space in order to sort of help create projects. And so I try and get people who may have zero experience with NASA, but maybe a researcher in a completely different discipline, to take their work and say, what if you took this work and you put it, on Mars, or if it became a space telescope, or things of that nature, and trying to get that infusion again of people from completely different disciplines to create cool things for space just by taking what they already do and applying it towards space. In the tech industry, there was a project that I thought was really fascinating because it used something that is kind of basic to tech, but applied it towards space. And in space, it's something that's amazing. So there was this project that took images of the moon and looked at the sunlight and how the sunlight hit the moon every day. And then it took those images and just did computer vision to create better routes for rovers on the moon, so that rovers on the moon can stay in continuous sunlight and they don't have to power down overnight. So it just figured out, how can this rover stay in continuous sunlight by doing computer vision and routing it around the dark areas. This is something that, like, in tech is like so basic, but we've never done that for rovers, in space. And so while NIAC might seem very, lofty and unattainable to people doing, interesting work in tech or research or wherever, there's actually a lot of like low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, of just taking the way we process certain things in one industry and applying it towards space and making it so that, rovers don't have to shut down overnight. Seems like a pretty basic thing.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it really speaks to what we were discussing before. And I think for a lot of the podcast, about how necessary having a design eye can be, especially when you're doing this forward thinking about new technologies and new necessities for, I guess, far future space flight and travel. There have been so many cool things that I've seen in the news about, like, applying origami to different shielding or to different lenses, and just these ways of doing things that are different than how they've been done before, that are often necessary. Even look at Curiosity at the rover. Come on, there was a sky crane. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, that was definitely crazy.
It's crazy. And probably when it was first thrown out, everybody was like, nope, that's not going to work. But then it was like, maybe it will. Maybe we should try this out. Yeah. And it takes having these crazy ideas to be able to do something that wasn't technically feasible before.
Yeah, well, talking about the origami, the star shade, which I assume is like one of the things that you were thinking about with the origami, having this big unfurling shade that would help us, block out starlight so that we could actually get images of exoplanets. So Starshade was originally funded by NIAC.
Cool.
And so, NIAC sort of is there to help get things kickstarted, and hopefully then they actually get taken onto missions in the future. And so with NIAC, anyone can apply. All that's needed is a 3-page white paper to apply. And in my typical way of doing things, I decided to make a website that made it easier for people to know how to apply to NIAC and what explicitly NIAC is looking for and what it's not looking for. And so every August, I think, is when the solicitation opens, and they take in, these applications for about a month or so. And so if you go to NIACfellows.org, you can sort of see if you could apply to it, or if someone could apply to it. So it's something that I'm really happy to be a part of it, even though it's definitely a more advanced area that I would be the first to admit that not everyone can, do research in this area.
Sure.
But it is open for anyone to apply to it. So they don't say, oh, you have to be an academic, or you have to be, a government worker. It's you can be a garage hacker. Really, it doesn't matter, so long as, the research that you're proposing to do is solid. So yeah, it's just been great to be able to help the program and try and grow it out further.
Well, I have to say, this may be the podcast that I've done over, the 150 some odd podcasts I've done. This may be the one with the most forward-facing action items that I've ever done. There's so many cool things that people who are listening can become engaged and involved with. And that's really secondary to the work that you do. Like because you have such a focus and such a passion for helping the citizens of the world make an impact and become involved and fulfill their curiosities and their passions, you are really paving the road for people to be able to do that. So I have to say thank you for that on behalf of myself and on behalf of my listeners, because I bet you a decent percentage of people listening to the show right now will have a nice spark and will start to dig deeper into some of their passions because they've listened to this. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
I
wouldn't know how to do anything else. It's really, ever since getting that first chance of getting a job at NASA, I don't know. It just set me on this path, and I don't think I would have it any other way, for sure.
And so I apologize at the beginning for calling you a journalist. I always try to be careful, because if anybody has ever written anything, I don't want to not give them that distinction. But would you consider yourself a science communicator? It's such a difficult thing when people say, what do you do for a living? And you have to give them the one-liner.
Yes, I struggle with that so much. So actually on that Science Channel show that we were on, How to Build Everything, they listed me as a space activist.
That's so cool.
So, I'm always hesitant. I'm always hesitant about that, because, I don't think you should necessarily call yourself an activist. I think your work should speak for that. But in terms of, trying to really, I guess, fight the powers that be and make things more accessible, that's certainly what I do. And I've never found a great title for that, because communicator, while it describes some of my work, and definitely you could argue, I can't do anything without communicating it effectively. I think, trying to make it, as you said, actual action items, and actually getting into the communities and doing the the hard work of figuring out what the challenges and blocks are for making things accessible, and doing work advising Congress and different governments, I think is really needed and important. And so I think that's one of many reasons why I struggle to always describe exactly myself in like just a short and sweet title, because I try to intentionally be broad, because I think everything is highly connected. And I think if you're only doing communication and not following it up with everything else, I think that is a different job from what I do.
Absolutely. All right, so let's review. You guys can pick up her book, What's It Like in Space? It's for sale everywhere. You can go to spacehack.org and get involved in citizen science projects. You can go to sciencehackday.org and either participate in a local science hack day or maybe even start your own. And you also have a YouTube channel, don't you?
Yes, I just started it.
You're very busy. So you can look up Ariel on her YouTube channel. And of course, you're very active in social media. Tell everybody where they can find you. Are you mostly Twitter? Are you Twitter and Facebook?
I'm mostly Twitter. You can definitely find me on everything as Ariel Waldman, but mostly Twitter.
Great. So everybody, send her a tweet. Say hi. Tell her what you learned and what you're excited to dive into. And Ariel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again.
It was wonderful. And everyone listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.